The rain that night was unlike anything Noah had seen in years. Thick, relentless sheets pouring from the sky, hammering the streets as if the heavens themselves were trying to wash the world clean. The sound on his small house's tin porch roof was deafening, and the wind howled through the trees like a warning. He had just tucked his 7-year-old daughter, Ellie, into bed when he heard the knock. A sharp, desperate sound that didn't belong to someone making a casual visit. Pulling his threadbare hoodie tighter against the chill, Noah opened the door and froze. 2 young girls stood there, identical, their hair plastered to their faces, dresses clinging to their shivering frames. They looked about 16, maybe 17, their arms locked around each other for warmth. For a heartbeat, Noah could only stare, rainwater splashing at their feet, their pale lips trembling as if they'd run miles through the storm. In their eyes was something more than cold, it was fear. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the quiet power of helping strangers when the world turns dark, please take a second to like this video, share it, subscribe to Kindness Corner, and leave a comment. Your engagement helps these real-life inspired stories reach hearts that need them most. Noah's life had been nothing but storms lately. After losing his wife 2 years ago in a sudden car accident, he had been raising Ellie alone. Money was tight, tighter than anyone knew. His job as a mechanic barely covered rent and groceries, and he'd given up on repairing the leak in the roof because the bills for Ellie's asthma medication always came first. He had learned to live with the cold drafts, the peeling paint, and the hum of the refrigerator that seemed older than he was. But he had not learned to live without a heart for people in need. So, without hesitation, he stepped aside, ushering the girls into the warm glow of the small living room, ignoring the puddle of water forming on his worn carpet. They didn't speak at first, only glancing nervously at each other, their identical expressions a strange mix of relief and reluctance, as though they weren't sure if stepping inside was the right choice. As they stood dripping by the couch, Noah noticed the cuts on their hands, the smudges of dirt along their arms. Their dresses, deep red and far too thin for the weather, clung to them like second skin, the fabric torn at the edges as though they had been caught on something sharp. He brought them towels and the biggest sweaters he could find from his and Ellie's drawers. Ellie peeked out from her bedroom, eyes wide at the sight of the strangers. In her small, trusting voice, she asked who they were. Noah wished he had an answer. The twins finally spoke, their voices trembling as they introduced themselves as Anna and Grace. They said they had been walking for hours after their car broke down and that they had nowhere to stay. Something in the way they avoided his gaze told Noah there was more to the story, but he didn't press. That night, as rain battered the windows and wind rattled the loose siding, the house felt strangely alive. Ellie insisted the twins share her room because she didn't want anyone to be cold. Noah set up extra blankets, knowing they would barely be enough. But when he checked on them later, the 3 girls were huddled together like they'd known each other for years. He watched them breathe, their faces softened by sleep, and felt a tug in his chest, the same one he'd felt the night he first brought Ellie home from the hospital, terrified and awestruck all at once. Morning came, and with it, a quiet tension. The storm had passed, leaving behind the smell of wet earth, and a pale winter light filtering through the curtains. The twins seemed hesitant to leave, as though they had no destination waiting for them. Noah offered breakfast. Just toast and eggs. And though they ate slowly, their hunger was obvious. Ellie chattered happily, asking them questions they mostly answered with small smiles. But when Noah asked if they wanted him to help fix their car or call someone for them, Anna's fork froze halfway to her mouth. Grace's eyes flickered to her sisters, and something unspoken passed between them. They said they'd figure it out, and changed the subject. Over the next hours, Noah found himself noticing small things. How the twins flinched at sudden noises, how they seemed to scan the room before speaking, how their eyes lit up when Ellie mentioned home, but dimmed again when she talked about her mother. They never asked for money, but they also didn't offer much about themselves. And yet, when Ellie accidentally spilled juice on her dress, both sisters jumped to help her clean it, fussing over her like protective older siblings. There was a gentleness in them that didn't match the wariness in their eyes. By mid-afternoon, Noah had decided he couldn't just let them walk away without knowing they'd be safe. He convinced them to stay another night. saying the roads were still too wet and dangerous. That evening, while the girls played a board game on the living room floor, Noah quietly stepped outside to get some air. The storm had left the neighborhood silent, but a black SUV was idling at the corner, engine running. The tinted windows made it impossible to see inside, but something about its stillness set off alarms in his mind. Moments later, the SUV drove away, its tires hissing on the wet pavement. When Noah went back inside, the twins were whispering, their faces pale. The truth came out the next morning in fragments. Grace admitted they hadn't been telling the full story. Their mother was alive, and very much looking for them, but not in the way Noah expected. They had run away from a mansion, from a life of guarded gates and staff who barely spoke to them, from a woman whose wealth was matched only by her absence. They said she was a millionaire, but not the kind who sat at home enjoying her fortune. She was always away on business, chasing bigger deals, and when she was around, her presence was colder than the rain they'd been standing in. The girls had left because they wanted to be somewhere real, even if it meant sleeping on couches or walking through storms. Noah didn't know whether to feel shocked or angry or heartbroken for them. He thought of Ellie and how she clung to him after nightmares, how she lit up when he came to pick her up from school, and he wondered how anyone could choose money over moments like that. But he also knew what it meant to be desperate for something you didn't have. Security, love, a place where you belonged. 2 days later, the millionaire mother showed up at his door. She was tall, poised, and dressed in clothes that looked like they'd come straight from a runway. Her car, the same black SUV Noah had seen, gleamed in the driveway. She didn't knock so much as announce herself, and when the twins saw her, their shoulders stiffened. Noah watched as the woman's eyes swept over his humble home, over the peeling paint and the second-hand furniture, and he braced for judgment. But instead, her gaze softened when she saw her daughters. The conversation that followed was quiet, tense, and full of pauses, but by the end of it, Anna and Grace hugged their mother with tears in their eyes. Something had shifted. Before leaving, the woman turned to Noah and thanked him, not with the shallow politeness of someone used to giving orders, but with the sincerity of a parent who had just realized what they almost lost. A week later, Noah found an envelope in his mailbox. Inside was a letter and a check large enough to cover months of rent, repairs to the roof, and Ellie's medication. In the letter, she wrote that his kindness had reminded her what truly mattered, and she intended to make changes, not just in her business, but in her family. If this story has touched your heart, if it's reminded you of the power we hold to change someone's life through simple acts of compassion, please like, share, and subscribe to Kindness Corner. These are the stories the world needs more of, and your support makes them possible.